The Wisley branches will soon be bare of leaves, but even at this time of year, Bertie Doe has some tasty vegetables to deal with.
Now November is here, it is time we stored our near-hardy vegetables, such as winter radish and Swedes. But we'll start with winter radish. This particular variety is Black Spanish. It's a very nice, mild flavour, and you store them pretty much similar to what we store beetroot and carrots. Just nip them off there. Instead of screwing them off, we cut them off. And we have them there, and put a bit of sand over the top, and store them in a nice airy shed. It doesn't have to be completely frost-free, because these vegetables are near hardy, and just about an inch of sand on the top like that. Now we go to swede. There's no tool needed to dig them up. You just get hold of the neck and pull, and it comes up quite easily. Now these Swedes will, when we cut them, will heel over. Unlike a lot of other vegetables, that will heel over, and so will the root end like that. And there we store them in sand, pretty similar to the way we've just done the radish. A little bit of sand over the top, like that. And there again, these will stand quite a few degrees of frost in a shed or some other building. All we need to do is keep them really dry. But they will stand 5 or 6 degrees or up to 10 degrees of frost.
Dave Hutchins planted shrubs in the shadiest part of our garden 2 months ago. Now he needs to put in smaller woodland plants to cover the ground between them.
Since our last visit here, you can see that the plants which we put in have made some growth. The autumn colour has really begun to show on this deciduous azalea over here. The rhododendrons are well budded up. We've lost the attractive red young growth on the pyrus at the back, but that again will come in the spring. Since that time, we've begun to put in some of the ground cover plants which I mentioned. We've put Pachysandra terminalis in here. You'll see that this particular one has got a nice variegated edge to the leaf, and later on will give us a flower. It'll also give us complete smother of the ground. Further back we've got Mechanopsis betanicifolia, which is the blue Himalayan poppy. This is not always the easiest of plants to grow, but is well worth the effort if you possibly can. In this area we've got Pulmonaria. This we've put a little further towards the front because the white marking on the leaf we would tend to lose if the shade was too dense. Further towards the front of the border there's a little more light so that we will maintain the colour there, and later on the flowers will come in the spring as well. But now we've got to the point, I'll just show you how to put in a few more plants which will give us some ground cover. This is Lily of the Valley, and most of you will know this and appreciate the fact that it's got a very nice scent. One thing you will notice with this is that there's 2 different sorts of buds on it. We've got the very much fatter ones like this one, which are going to flower next year, and these are thinner, which will next year only produce growth, but the following year will give us some flowers. These you buy in a dried off, dormant state, but most of the roots are still alive, and as soon as you plant, will come away. Well, we'll plant one of the roots which has got a nice fat bud. And the easiest way of doing this, rather than fiddling with the trowel, is just to scrape a shallow depression with your hand, lay it in, spread out the roots a little bit, and then just cover it back with soil. And you'll see that the bud is just below the surface, just poking through.
One of the tricks to split difficult plants is to use 2 forks, back to back, to prise the clump apart. You can do it with your fingers, but the forks do a better job. Before the clumps are planted, any leaves that are damaged or diseased should be peeled away. This variety is related to the common primrose. Like the wild sort, it likes a moderately shaded position with a rich but loose type of soil. Dave Hutchins is planting the roots 3 or 4 inches deep. Woodland primulas do well in moderate shade, but trilliums thrive even in the gloomiest corner.
Now we're going to plant these trilliums in the back side of the garden against the wall where there's very much more shade, because trilliums do not like very much sunlight. The thing to remember about planting trilliums is the depth at which you plant them. You don't plant them quite as shallowly as you would an iris, where the rhizome is virtually on the surface soil. You put them in a bit more, but you don't cover up the buds. So I'll just show you the depth to plant. Make a shallow hole, a little deeper than we did with the lily of the valley. Make sure that the roots are all in there and fairly well spread out. And then just put the soil back over them. Just firm them in lightly. And as you can see, the rhizome is covered, but the actual buds themselves are still showing.
This conifer hedge was planted in early summer. The Cupressus macrocarpa gold cone has grown well. Sid Love is going to try a deciduous hedge at the other side of the garden.
The preparation for this hornbeam that we're planting now is exactly the same. Take out a good trench, get your manure well down into the bottom of the trench, because it's going to be here many years, don't forget. But the reason that we're planting hornbeams at this time of the year and not in June is because they're bare root. You see, I have these laid in here, and there we are. That's an excellent plant, you see. And it's a good 5 feet high at the moment, so it will soon mature into a good hedge. Now, I'm putting these 2 feet apart, and it's very difficult to have a garden line for this type of thing because you need to move so much soil. So I get my little cane, mark 2 feet, I just make the mark there, and then put my plant in. Now here again, of course, this is a two-handed job really, so you must dig your wife out from the kitchen or by the television and get her to come and give you a hand. And keep shaking the plant to allow this soil to go in around the roots. Although the soil is absolutely perfect, one wouldn't think it's November. Now then, this is where you put the boot in. Don't be afraid of it. Get it in nice and firm. Now, in about 3 years' time, this will be an excellent hedge. I won't do anything to it now in the way of trimming, not until next spring. Let the weather decide what it's going to do before I do any pruning to it. And get some more strength into it. And there you are. Good luck with your hornbeam hedge. They make an excellent barrier, I can assure you.
Reg Perriman is getting down to his digging again. For many jobs in the garden, the earlier the preparation, the better the results. And in this case, harsh winters are even an advantage.
We first of all take out a trench, which is 2 foot wide, and we take out the soil to a spade's depth. That's roughly 1 foot. Clean out the crumb out of the bottom and put the soil on either side. And if you do this and it's left there during the winter time, you'll find that the frost will get right through these ridges and help to break down all this soil, so that when we fill this back in again around about February time, we should have a good depth of nice fine soil for the roots of our sweet peas to grow into. Now then, sweet peas are quite deep rooted and they're quite hungry feeders, so we have to prepare the ground quite well. So having taken all the soil out and cleaned up the bottom of our trench, we then must apply some well-rotted manure or perhaps some very good compost. Quite a liberal dressing in the bottom of the trench, so that we can then, I think we may be better if we get that in with a shovel. Give quite a good dressing of it, whatever you can afford. If you've got plenty, the more the better. Having got your manure into the trench, just even it out a little bit with your fork. And then just break up the bottom of the trench. Doesn't matter if it's manure still showing a little bit, but we just break it up. You'll probably find down the bottom there it's quite hard, but if we can break it up, As you can see, some rough old rubbish down there. Certainly wants enriching a bit to help the sweet peas to grow, to make a really good show. And we'll just carry on. No need to break it up too small, doesn't matter about that, the frost will do that for us. And if you've got very heavy soil, you'll find that this will probably come out in great big clods. Don't try to break it up, just let the weather do it for you. And if we leave that then until around about February time, we can come back to it and fill it in and get ready for our plants to go in.
The tender freesia seedlings kept in the cold frame should be brought into the cool greenhouse now. The sweet peas sown last month are reaching the size when they need potting on. Each seedling with its long taproot should be separated carefully and potted on individually into 3.5-inch pots. John Innes No. 1 potting compost is the right mixture for the sweet pea seedlings. Make sure that the long taproot finishes deep down in the compost. The seedlings will need to be watered and plunged in sand in the cold frame to take them through the winter. Then, early next spring, they will be ready for planting out in Reggie's trench.
Well, now that the delphiniums are getting over, and as you can see, these aren't quite over yet, but this other plant here is dying off, it's time to think about cutting them down and tidying them up for the winter. And if we cut them down to somewhere around about 4 inches from the ground, and just leave those stalks there, we can tidy all this up. And all this material, providing it hasn't got any disease in it, can all go to our compost heap. It'll all make good compost. Just tidy the other ends up. And any other debris that's lying around in between, clear this out so that it leaves the plant nice and clean. Any weeds or anything just around, you can clear it up to make it neat and tidy.
Clearing away the debris will save some tender delphinium shoots, but you might need some extra help against slugs. Keep the pellets well away from children or pets.
So if we give this a good liberal dressing of slug pellets, this will help to keep the slugs at bay so that we get the plants and not the slugs.
If you've got a delphinium that you're really proud of, and one that you might want to take cuttings from, don't leave it in the ground, lift it carefully and settle the roots into a pot. It's still going to need some protection from the weather, though.
All we need to do is to just place this in a cold frame, no heat at all for the winter time, and give it plenty of air. We're not worried about the cold, it's a case of keeping them reasonably dry. And if we just have a look at it from time to time and give it a little water if required, just to keep it moist so that we can get the growth in the springtime.
With fewer jobs to do outside, now is the time to catch up with some chores in the greenhouse. Here's a new Wisley expert, Anne Swithenbag.
Glasshouse hygiene is a very important part of caring for your glasshouse, and it's of vital importance to clear up all the rubbish that lands on the glasshouse floor, because in this rubbish, eggs of pests and spores of fungus will stay all through the winter, and the following season they will come out again and infect your plants. Here I have an example of a plant that was formerly infected with red spider. And if you look, you can just see the actual spiders themselves and the webs that they have formed, which happens in severe cases of infestation. Now, these, if they're not cleared away, will emerge the following year and reinfect the plant. So it's of vital importance to clear all this rubbish away from the glasshouse floor. In the soil that has been tipped out of the pots onto the floor, you may also find the little larvae of the vine weevil, which are pale in colour and have very brown heads. And again, these will overwinter and hatch out in the spring to the adult weevils, which will lay eggs in the soil in the pots and cause further infestations. So I can't stress too much the importance of removing all this. The other very important thing is to clear all the weeds away from the glasshouse benches and glasshouse areas in general. Under the bench we have bittercress and chickweed growing. These must be got rid of because they harbour whitefly and red spider. They're a bad weed, an annual weed, and it's a very short period between the germination and the seeding of the plant, so that it regenerates itself so quickly that it has to be got rid of, otherwise you'll have a continuous carpet growing under the bench. Even the healthiest of plants can have their problems, and observation is as much an important part of glasshouse hygiene as anything else. We must look under the leaves to make sure that the plants are clean and healthy. A yellow leaf is a sure sign that there's something wrong with the plant, and by turning it over we can actually see that the geranium has rust, and these are the rust spores in a typical circular pattern. And there again, a fresher patch of rust spores. These leaves should be taken off and discarded because the rust spores will spread and infect other plants. Here is another leaf showing problems. You can see the specklings which are caused by the chlorophyll being taken out of the leaf by a pest. If we turn the leaf over, we can see that it's suffering from two pests. We have whitefly over here, which is causing sooty mould also, and over on this side of the leaf there are wide infestations of red spider mite. So we can take this leaf off as well. It's going to be of no use to the plant shortly, and it's better to take it off completely and get rid of all the eggs and infestation. Then we stand more chance of controlling the pest by spraying the rest of the plant without these eggs, which are often not killed by sprays and are much better got rid of. The other thing to look out for are the soil pests which lurk inside the pots themselves. As well as vine weevils, we have to watch out for root mealybug. It's a good idea to regularly check by tapping out the pots and examining the soil ball. And on here we will see that there is the characteristic white and woolly manifestations of the root mealybug itself. Now this will eat away at the roots and cause quite a lot of damage and can become quite widespread. So any pots which have got a lot of this in should be either treated with a drench or got rid of completely because it will only spread. And any old plants that are being thrown out where this is seen in the pot should be discarded and taken right away from the glasshouse and not thrown under the bench, as these will only breed under there and come back into other plants that are growing in the glasshouse.
One of the jobs that you can do outside in the winter months is planting bare-rooted trees. David Mulford has a simple device that really helps him to plant the tree in exactly the right spot. It's a planting board, just a length of wood with notches at each end and the centre, 4 pegs and a loop of string.
But first of all, let's get rid of this then. Leave the 2 pegs either side. We'll scribe the circle 18 inches from there, which makes a 3-foot diameter hole. Get rid of our crucial peg, and then we'll start digging the hole by first of all removing the turf. Well, that's the hole finished. I won't labour the point about digging a hole and manure and everything. Believe me, it's a labour of love. But let's come to the planting board again. Now, here we locate it on the 2 pegs. And here is the exact position of the tree. So let's get the tree to it then. And here you see we've located it. But the board serves another purpose, and this is to show you the level which it's to be planted. There's the original planting depth, and that will be located by the board again. Now, a third purpose of this board is very useful. It comes in as a third hand. And if we tie this to the board here now, lo and behold, it's stable. Some trees no need to be supported, but I feel a tree with this shape and this size, we need to have a stake. And while the tree's in the position, we can locate the stake without damaging the roots. And this is where we shall have it. Now, in order not to, damage the tree itself, we need to take the tree away for a second.
Whether you use a mallet, big hammer, or in this case a drywall, it's better to keep the tree well out of the way to avoid any damage. There we are, nice and firm. And it's easy to replace the tree back again. And it's really no need to have a planting board at this stage because we can support the tree at the top with the stake. Well, by now you may be wondering just what this tree is. In fact, it's the American hornbeam, Carpinus caroliniana. It's a very attractive tree. You can see it's coming near its dormancy period by showing autumn colour. It grows to about, well, 20 to 30 feet in this country, quite slowly, and especially in this type of soil. Talking about dormancy, you'll notice that all along we've had a bare-rooted tree rather than container-grown. And this has got a very important point as regards to planting, because container-growns, as you know, can be planted all the year round, with the right conditions, of course, but bare-rooted trees must be planted in the dormant season, and this is generally from about mid to late November to about mid to late February. Right, well, I just spotted some roots, broken roots, some here and one here, which need to be taken away. It causes disease, that sort of thing. So let's have this one right out, right back there, and this one too. Take it right back to the source. Tease all these roots out nice and comfortably. Well, that's fairly satisfactory. Just one final check for the position of the tree itself. Yes, and now we can start actually planting it.
A gentle shake makes the soil settle better all round the roots. A proper tree tie with a rubber buffer should be held in place with a nail. Tidy up afterwards and remove the lower side branches to leave a balanced overall shape. Tender embryo figs are going to need some winter protection. A thatch of dead bracken will protect them from the worst of the frosts. With the alpines, it's winter dampness that you may need to guard against. John Warwick.
One of the other small jobs for the autumn is to cover grey foliage and woolly plants with sheets of glass against the damp over the surface of the plant. Not for the moisture underneath, but over the top. We've got one covered over here, and we're going to cover this one over here. It prevents the excessive wet over plants that are susceptible in winter, where they would normally come from drier atmosphere areas. I'm just putting these on here. It's easier to put the wires in first and slip the glass on top. All it is it's a piece of wire that is bent into shape like that, and then you put as many on as you need, and the draft and air can go right through underneath. It actually stops the water coming on the surface of the plant. There's plenty of moisture going through the sides there.
The pond will need some protection too from the falling leaves that can sour and foul the water. Netting the pond is the best way of keeping the leaves off and makes collection easier too. Keep the netting on until late December, when all the leaves should be off the trees.